Welcome back. And it's also my welcome back as I just came back from Spain last week and I'm still a little jet lagged. And before I get started, I wanted to announce that I'm opening up enrollment for my Strength and Introduction to Plyometrics program today. It's an 8-week online program working directly with me where you will learn the foundations, the introduction to plyometrics, which is also known as jump training. I combine the plyometric exercises with a solid strength workout that supports the development of your muscles to accept and handle the plyometrics. And as you probably know, I've mentioned before, I started plyometrics and agility training at the age of 52. So just a little over a year ago. And I have never felt more agile in my body and light on my feet. I feel athletic, even though I don't consider myself an athlete. And I want to share that experience of what that feels like with other women my age. So I'll drop the link to the program in the show notes. Now on to today's episode. So this past weekend, after my trip, I binged the entire and current season of Industry. And in case you don't know, it's a drama or kind of dark drama about working at an investment bank, specifically the sales and trading desk at an international bank in London. And the main characters are in their first career, like I was when I worked on Wall Street. So they're all in their early 20s, early to mid 20s. Now, while most of the sex and the drugs are exaggerated, sorry to tell you that what you see on that show is not exactly how it is. There are elements of truth. I love the show because it does remind me much of what it was like working at Goldman Sachs in the late 90s. Now, I know everyone watching Industry is watching and focusing on the debauchery and the greed of Wall Street. But I'm reminded every time I watch it of the key elements about business that so crucially formed my ethics today. And I wanted to share that with you because I find these two business practices so relevant to being successful professionally. Number one, you treat everyone like a client. And this was so emphasized at Goldman Sachs. Another way you can phrase it is follow-up. Now, I know everyone thinks they know what follow-up is and that we all yeah, in business or in life, you always follow up with people. But at Goldman Sachs, we were taught to treat everyone, especially our coworkers, as if they were an important client. Now, Goldman Sachs has a reputation of being the best at what they do. They have the wealthy, most bespoke private and institutional investor clients. And if a client calls, you answer immediately and you take care of them. Now, this was the same for internal inquiries. So if the bond desk called my desk to ask an equities question, we returned their call or we would pick up right away with all the information they needed, even if the time spent meant nothing to our business bottom line. So our desk's bottom line might not have benefited from that time spent in providing the answer to the bond desk, but we never looked at it that way. This practice was ingrained in us when we're at Goldman Sachs. There was an understood respect for each other in the firm. Everyone treated each other like the most important client. If an equities trader called the research analyst with a question about a specific company they covered because it was related to a trade, that call was returned with the answer as if we were actually a big hedge fund. Now, since then, how I brought that into my own business practice is I wanted to give you a few examples. When I had my jewelry stores and when I run my fitness business now, I respond and confirm all my appointments, even if they are weekly standing appointments. For me, it's a small sign of professionalism that goes a long way for my student or my client. If I get a random inquiry that's coming from a prospective client and it comes via email or call, I will return the email within 12 hours. And honestly, most of the time it's within the hour. And I wanted to give you an example of how something as simple as a follow-up is what can make someone pick you over someone else. There's a private client that I work with, and it's probably been almost over a year. And when I first met him, he was trying to decide between me and two other trainers that were approved by his building. And the reason why he chose me, I like to think because I'm the best, but it wasn't. He chose me because the other two never returned his phone call. So when he reached out to me naturally, the way I do things is I'm always immediate in responding. So as I'm telling you this, it might seem to you so simple and obvious, but I know even in your own life, you've been the recipient of lack of professionalism, especially in terms of business. And I'm reminded of when I first opened up my jewelry stores, and I would call vendors, the vendors that I needed to help me in the build out of the store. I was ready, and as you probably would be, to end my search. I didn't want to make 20 different phone calls. I wanted to find the person who could do the job and just pay them the money. Yet 60% of the vendors that I contacted never returned a call or an email. Another example of the underrated importance of follow-up. A friend of mine, Emily, got married this year, and she did all her wedding planning. She was trying to find a location, the caterer, flowers, the whole drill. Naturally, like anyone else planning their wedding, she doesn't want to make 10 of 11 billion phone calls in order to find all these vendors. We want to have our work be finished immediately. We want to spend the money so that someone can get the job done. And she also shared with me how appalled she was, how so many wedding vendors who are already getting paid more than a normal vendor never called her back or followed up. I think of that follow-up as a way to have easy money. All these businesses could have been hired if they just returned a phone call or an email. So don't underestimate the importance of the simple follow-up. I really, in my head, always think I treat everyone like a client. And the second most important lesson that I carry through from my days of Goldman Sachs is, and this has been integrated into my business ethos, be long-term greedy. Now, despite the reputation and the scandals of Wall Street firms that have hit the news in the past, which is always going to make headlines, Goldman Sachs' motto that they taught their young analysts, which I was back coming out of college, and through their actual actions with clients, was to be long-term greedy. Or the nicer way of saying it is play the long game. Instead of thinking about that buck you're going to make today, sometimes you have to take less profit or small loss in order to establish and concretize a long-term relationship which ends in profit. The long-term business relationship is always the goal. For example, back to my jewelry store days, if I had a customer complain about a piece of jewelry, even if they exceeded the 30-day return policy, most of the time I would just refund them. And why? To keep that small amount of profit from what they spent wasn't worth it to me for the expense of an unhappy customer. It's also why I had decided on primarily only working in silver and gold, because anything that costs less, whether it be for the customer or costs less to make, if it was going to break, it wasn't worth it for me to have someone complaining about something breaking. So I always wanted to create pieces that lasted a long time because I wanted a happy customer. So when you make an exception, like letting someone return something beyond the 30-day return policy, it really lets people appreciate that they're more than just profit, that they feel heard, and that they get the idea that you want them to be happy. Even in my fitness business with my online coaching, let's say someone signs up with me for 3 months. During the first month, I can always tell if it's going to work out. And if they're not showing up for a lot of their workouts that I've programmed for them, and when I say showing up, like them doing it self-guided, I don't want to get paid for the time that if they're not using my service. So I usually suggest, I know you signed up for 3 months, but this is not working out. Why don't we not continue, that you're going to be paid. Because if it's not working for them, it's not worth me getting paid 2 additional months of revenue from them when they're not getting any value. So I'm not going to hold them to the promise of the three months that they had committed to if it's not going to be useful for them. So all that going to say, for lesson number 2, I believe in always playing the long game, or being long-term greedy, however you want to think of it. If, for example, if that client wants to work with me in the future, when she's ready, I'll be there. I don't really care to take someone's money for a service that's not going to be effective for her. So even though I have not spent my entire career in finance, the lessons I learned from my first formative job, which was at Goldman Sachs, have left deep impressions in my business ethos. And you know how it is. We learn who we want to be, how we want to conduct business, how we want to manage others from our past work and boss experiences. I hope this podcast episode leaves you thinking more about follow-up and playing the long game like I do. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to talking to you next week.
I'm Coach Tina. For more information about how to work with me, head to ironstrongfitness.com and send me a message. I'll see you next time.